Hi, it's Andrew Collins here, and I want to give you an update on the Dragon Man skull story and its relationship to the Denisovans, and also some very interesting mythology that I've got onto in relation to the area where the actual skull was found in China. So, but let's start by going over all the facts again, just so everything is clear. The skull was found originally in 1933 when some workmen were creating a bridge over a river called the Songhai, and it was in the city of Harbin, and that is in the north of China in the province of heilong. And that actually means Black Dragon River, which we'll come back to. Now, it remained hidden in a well until 2018. The reason being is that the Japanese were about to invade that area of China. So the person that found it hid it in a well, for some reason didn't bring it out until he revealed it to his grandson when he himself was on his deathbed in 2018, and obviously it was brought to the attention authorities and it's been examined, and 3 papers have been published recently on it. It is 146,000 years old, which is the period that is known as the Middle Pleistocene as far as geological or paleoclimatological epochs are concerned. It's the Middle Paleolithic as far as archaeology. Now, the skull bears some very unique traits. I mean, it's massive, we'll come back to that, but it shows that it is both archaic human, that's the name that we give for all of the people that existed prior to anatomical modern humans, and in some cases contemporary with us, like the Neanderthals, the Denisovans, Homo erectus. But it also shows certain modern human features as well. In other words, it has the appearance of anatomical modern humans. So it would suggest that there's some relationship with our own ancestors there. Now, it is of a male around 50 years of age, and a so-called phylogenetic study. Now, basically that refers to family trees, the family trees of how we relate to Neanderthals, Denisovans, Homo erectus, Homo heidelbergensis, and all these much older types of human. It's a study of that, but this was done by a Bayesian analysis. What that means, it's all to do with statistics. And this is something that's actually given the Chinese team enough evidence to suggest that the Dragon Man skull is a unique human species, and they have called it Homo longi, which essentially does mean Dragon Man. However, what we find is that a lot of Western paleoanthropologists, paleogeneticists don't accept this, and they feel that the skull is going to relate to something that we already know about, most obviously to Denisovans, which we'll come on to. And what else? Yeah, that's about it for the moment. The size is quite unique. It's 23 centimeters by 17 centimeters in size. That's from an overhead position. You can see it here, which is approximately about 9 inches by 6 inches. Now, that's very large for an archaic human, and we'll show you the comparison here. Right, here's 5 skulls that were found in China relating to archaic humans, and you can quite clearly see that the largest of them, the one on the right, which is the Harbin skull, is the largest of them. But you can also see that how they've got these incredible brow ridges. These are one of the aspects of an archaic human, something that we modern humans don't really have today. I mean, occasionally a few people are born with them, but it's something that was sort of, you know, genetically removed from our DNA a long time ago. So it is extremely rare, but it was very common. In fact, almost essential as far as the archaic humans are concerned. Now, this is a reconstruction of what they think that the Homo longi or dragon man looks like. But I mean, I'd be careful with these type of reconstructions because they are always biased, no matter how they're done or by whom or what evidence they use to create them. There is personal bias. So, don't look at this image of this guy holding up this spear point or whatever and say, oh, is that exactly what Dragon Man looked like? Because almost certainly he didn't. And I'll show you shortly, possibly how he did look. But of course, the big question is he really a unique species, or is he evidence of a Denisovan? Now, Denisovans we'll come on to as to who they are, or a little bit of a backstory. But here's what's being said at the moment. I mean, this is an article that was in the BBC News online, and it talks all about the Dragon Man discovery, but it states various times that Western, scientists are not accepting what the Chinese team have said. And the Chinese, in some ways, there's a link between what they're saying and nationalism in a way, in the fact that the Chinese do want to believe that, everything started in China and moved out from there. We find this also with the written language, which they believe began in China. They believe that modern humans began in China. And now, obviously, they've got this unique human species that could also have been involved with the birth of modern humanity as, exclusively Chinese. But others are saying not. I mean, for instance, we got here quoted in this BBC article, Professor Marta Marizon La from the University of Cambridge believes that the Dragon Man was in fact a Denisovan. The Denisovans are this fascinating mystery population from the past. There is a suggestion from DNA evidence that the jawbone found in the Tibetan plateau might be a Denisovan. Well, I'll come on to that. But basically, this was a jawbone that was found in 1980 in a cave called the Bashiai Cave. And it was extremely large. And it was given by a monk, because this was a place of pilgrimage, to his local lama, and he eventually brought it to the attention of the authorities, and it was studied and was found to be Denisovan by virtue of the protein in the teeth, and also the fact that Denisovan DNA has been traced in the soil of the cave now. So we're pretty certain it is Denisovan. And as you said here, and now because the jawbone from Tibet and Dragon Man look like each other, now we might actually have the first face of a Denisovan. In other words, this is the first Denisovan skull that's ever been discovered. So who are the Denisovans? Well, we didn't know anything about them until 2010, when the examination of a small little finger bone that was found at a place called the Denisova Cave in Siberia was examined and its genome extracted. And this was found to be unlike any other type or member of the human family that we'd come across up to this time. It wasn't Neanderthal, it wasn't modern human, it was something new. And it quickly gained the title Denisovans after the name of the cave itself. What was so interesting is that it was found that a low percentage, anything between, say, 0.5% and 5 to 6% of Denisovan DNA was still present in quite a large number of modern populations, particularly those in Central, Southern, Eastern and Southeastern Asia, and also in Australia. And these little circles that you can see here on this map show where those modern populations are. The arrows represent the suggested lines of migration of the Denisovans out of Africa, which almost certainly is where they came from originally, going to the Denisova cave, the Bashir cave in the Tibetan plateau, and obviously onwards towards Harbin, which is where the Dragon Man skull was found. So it all makes sense of migrational movements. So who exactly were the Denisovans as far as, you know, their place in the family tree is concerned? And essentially there was a common ancestor to modern humans, to Neanderthals and to Denisovans. It is thought to be another type of archaic human named Homo heidelbergensis. And around 800,000 years ago, there was a split. And one line eventually became modern humans, and the other line became eventually Neanderthals and two types of Denisovans. A northern variant that's found in Siberia, China, Mongolia, Tibet, which we call the Siberian Denisovans, and the other type of Denisovans who are found in the south and southeast, who are known as Sunda Denisovans. And this is how that tree looks like in simple forms. And obviously what split off from the same branch as the Denisovans was the Neanderthals themselves. They lingered around until around 40,000 years ago, maybe just slightly later, and probably very similar to how long the Denisovans were around. I mean, the latest evidence to do with you know, anatomical fossil remains go back to about 50,000 years and begin about 200,000, although arguably they're much older. And with Neanderthals, they basically, you know, are in Europe. It's now believed from about 400,000 years ago down to, as I say, 30 to 40,000 years. And obviously, you know, we're in theory the only survivor of this line. So the other important thing to point out is that of all of the archaic humans in the past, including ourselves, the Denisovans would seem to have been quite advanced technologically. They were very sophisticated in what they were up to. And this is denoted from a number of different finds that have come from the so-called Denisovan layer in the Denisovan cave in Siberia, including, just as an example, this incredible so-called Denisovan bracelet made of a green stone called chloritolite, and it's beautifully carved, beautifully polished, and it's got a hole penetrated through it, which has a speed rate of a drill that is comparable to that of one from the modern day. So, I mean, I talk all about this in my books and lectures, so I won't go into it, but all you need to know is that the Denisovans in Siberia and, you know, arguably elsewhere were incredibly sophisticated. So, you know, that's something to bear in mind. Now, this came from the same layer as that that Denisovan bracelet. I believe it did. I'll have to double, triple check on that. But it is two fragments of a parietal skull, you know, or parietal bone of a skull of a Denisovan, and it was very thick. And it told us, and it told those that examined it, that the Denisovans were going to be particularly large, and some suggested that they were going to be the size of you know, some kind of American football player. In other words, a bulky character, basically. And that definitely seems to be what is coming out now. But, you know, based on that skull and a number of other pieces of evidence, we commissioned an artist by the name of George Hernandez to try and see if he could create the image of a Denisovan. And this was some of his early preliminary drawings, basically. Now, we went on to create like a final version, which I think, in all honesty, looked too human. This early study, I think, was far closer to it, and it also matches very well with what we know now about the Dragon Man skull. I mean, here, once again, here is the reconstruction. But the reason why this particular news story here is on, you know, is on the screen is from Haaretz, which is one of the main Israeli newspapers, and that is that a discovery that was made and announced essentially the same week as the Dragon Man skull at a place called Nesha Ramla, which is not far from Tel Aviv, just on the ascent up into so-called Judean hills in the West Bank, has revealed evidence of an incredible human ancestor, a so-called hominin, as they're known, which is now being linked with the dragon man skull. As you can see from this headline, Israeli archaeologists think new Chinese hominin dragon man may be Homo Nesher. So what's going on here? Well, Nesha Ramla is a site that dates to about 120 to 140,000 years ago. And evidence of quite sophisticated stone tool technology has been found here. Also possibly an inscribed bone, that's got marks that are intentional. But the skull and other evidence that's coming out from the site suggests that there was a mixture of activity going on here. Archaic humans and humans with more modern features. And when I say more modern features, they have teeth that are exactly the same, but close to those of modern humans today, but teeth that also had earlier been found at a site called the Qesem cave, which we'll come on to in a second. But yeah, this is the skull here, the Nesha Ramla skull, an example of one of their stone tools there, and archaeologists still involved in excavations there. So Nesha Ramla is actually quite close to the Qesem cave. You can see on this map here how close they are. And the thing about the Qesem cave, it's from a slightly earlier epoch, from about 400,000 down to about 200,000. So Nesha Ramla could almost be the continuation of it at a new site. I mean, Nesha Ramla is actually an open air site. It was actually found when I think they were digging for a new car park or something. But anyway, that they found the remains and started doing proper archaeological explorations. And as I said, they've discovered part of a skull of a type of hominin, archaic human, which we didn't even know existed before. So the Qesem, this is the Qesem cave here. I was there in 2019, spent some time with the archaeologists working on the site. And the importance about this place and the so-called, Qesem people or Qesem cave people is that they do seem to have had modern human attributes. In other words, they weren't Neanderthals, they weren't Denisovans, they were something unique. And this is very important because the earliest evidence of proto-anatomical modern humans outside of Israel comes from places like one site in Morocco, a few other sites in Central Africa, and these only go back to a maximum of 200 to 300,000 years ago, whereas the Qesem cave is much, much older. And so it's even suggested to some that anatomical modern humans may have even started in Israel or the Levant in general, but that's a very controversial matter and a matter of debate. But the Qesem people became incredibly technologically advanced. I write all about this in the new book that I'm bringing out. And amongst the finds in the cave was a swan bone that had been deliberately modified, which you can see here on the screen, bottom left, where not only was it modified for use in some purpose, and bear in mind that this is a wing bone of a swan, the bone that's used to actually give flight, but it's quite clear that the feathers were used as well for some purpose, almost certainly not just ceremonial, but shamanic in nature, to achieve access into otherworldly environments to communicate with non-human intelligences. Now, I'm not just saying this is the conclusion of the archaeologists that are working on the site, including this gentleman here that you see in frame, who is Rambakai, who, you know, is an incredibly forward-thinking Israeli archaeologist. I spent some time with him, a very enlightened guy. But what's so interesting is that the Qesem people become the most sophisticated in the world between 200 and 400,000 years ago. And all of this just can't be coincidence. I mean, quite clearly, the relationship between this and the birth of shamanism is indisputable. And this is my reveal for the first time ever of an image which Russell Hussein, a London artist who's worked close with me on a number of different projects, has produced this image, which will be one of the plates in the new book, called The First Shaman. And, you know, it shows what we consider one of these shamans to have looked like as early as 400,000 years ago, you know, doing a ritual inside the Qesem cave. I mean, everything here, all of the imagery relates to evidence that's been found in the cave and will be revealed in the new book. But the fact that archaeologists are now linking the Nesha Ramla people with the dragon man skull found in China is something that I predicted back in 2019. I did this article for Ancient Origins entitled New Shocking Clues into Human Origins from Qesem Cave. And in this, what I suggested was that the proto-Denisovans coming out of Africa and moving through the Levant encountered the Qesem people, and that the two interbred, and that the result of this was a continuing movement that went on into Central and Eastern Asia, and that those people became the Siberian Denisovans, the northern Denisovans, that were quite different to the southern Denisovans, who do not seem to A, have had the same type of technology and sophistication, and B, their DNA was a lot more primitive than that of the northern Denisovans. So this is what I wrote in the article. And this was one of the sort of trees that I created to sort of show this link, that, you know, this embrace between the proto anatomical modern humans and the Siberian Denisovans, you know, that sort of came together as these proto-Denisovans were moving through the Levant, you know, probably around 400,000 years ago, maybe slightly later. And, you know, this was my conclusion in that article. Thus, it becomes possible that the Qesem individuals, as a fusion of predispersal modern humans, Homo sapiens, and proto-Denisovans, were in fact the forerunners of the Siberian Denisovans, who as a hybrid population, after leaving the Levant, continued their journey eastward past the Caspian Sea into first North Asia and then finally East Asia. Well, East Asia obviously includes China, and I think that all of this is correct. And this is exactly what the archaeologists, the anthropologists are saying now. I mean, this I pulled from one of the papers a couple of days ago. The Nesha Ramla homotype shows Israel as the point of foundation, and obviously arrows going into Europe to create pre-Neanderthal and Neanderthal populations, and another arrow going into Asia and becoming the archaic Homo populations with Neanderthal-like features there from 400 to 70,000 years ago. So, you know, all of this is now beginning to make sense. And, you know, this is the story that I'm going to be telling in the first several chapters of my part of this book, Origins of the Gods, written with my colleague, Gregory Little. And the subtitle of the book is The Qesem Cave, Skinwalkers, Contact with Transdimensional Intelligences. The subtitle is to cover a multitude of things which are also included in the book. So, you know, don't let that put you off of it, this not being a quite scholarly book, which it really is. And interesting enough, it's got a foreword by my friend and colleague Eric von Daniken, who's author of The Chariots of Gods. And what he says, and how it relates to the book is very, very important indeed, because, the book itself also looks at the origins of non-human intelligences and our communication with them. And it all relates to the origins of shamanism. Anyway, going back now to the Dragonman skull, here's some very, very interesting facts. As I said, the skull was found when a bridge was being built over the Songaya River at the city of Harbin. Now, the Songaya River is a branch of a much larger river called the Amur. You can see it on the screen here, which essentially divides the Russian Far East from China. Now, this Amur River is known in, let's get this right, in Mandarin as heilong. And that means the Black Dragon River. And there is a legend which is found amongst the so-called Manchurian people of the region, which talks about the birth of this black dragon, which is incredibly interesting. It is said that, in ancient times, a woman gave birth to a child. And as soon as this child appeared, it was obvious that, it was, not an obvious human child. It looked like a black dragon. The husband decided that he would kill this abominable creature, as it were. And the dragon tried to get out of a window. And as it did so, the husband managed to chop off its leg. Sorry, not its tail, not its legs. And so now we've got a tailless dragon. And apparently it goes down to the local river where it meets a white dragon. And this white dragon has a battle with the black dragon. And the black dragon is the victor. And it is for this reason that the river is called the Black Dragon River, which is the heilong. So that's a nice little story, but there's more to it than this, because heilong, which means black dragon, can also mean, and you can see it on the screen here, chimp dragon. Now, when I see the word chimp, I think that is just a sort of mistranslation for ape. And indeed, the description of a heilong or black dragon here is, as the name suggests, this Chinese dragon resembles a primate, including opposable thumbs. Now, this is thumbs that like we've got that can move in like that and or point, that type of thing. That's opposable thumbs, okay? So what you've got here is this evidence that the black dragon is some kind of dragon-like primate, or do we dare to say archaic human of the past? Is it possible that the black dragon in Manchurian mythology is some kind of abstract memory of the dragon man's skull, which itself is Denisovan? In other words, is the black dragon a memory of the Denisovans in this region? I think the answer is yes. We can go further, because the black dragon is one of the so-called 5 dragon kings. And the way these dragon kings are represented are as biped humans, but quite clearly with faces that look almost like demons, or let's say dragons. And on the screen here, you can see the black dragon. So is this a representation of Denisovans of the past, of the dragon man, of Homo longi? Again, it's clearly something that's abstract, very distorted, very symbolic, but I think the answer is yes. And what we find in all the areas where Denisovan remains have been recovered so far is stories of giants and ogres and demons of great size in mythology that existed in these regions prior to modern humans coming in and taking over those same regions. I think all of them are a memory in some way of the presence of Denisovans and other types of archaic humans. And to me, if you ask me what a Denisovan looks like or what type of size they are, I think that, you know, they would resemble something like this, which is the WWE wrestler, the great Kali, Dalip Singh Rana, from North India. We don't know if he's got any Denisovan DNA. Maybe I should write to him one day. I mean, he's 7 feet 2 inches in height. And, you know, I think the Denisovans would have had this type of height. The Dragon Man skull is massive, and some of the reports are even referring to it as giant. And it could well be that we have evidence here, the first ever evidence of the giants of legend being real, aside from all of the stories of giant skeletons and bones being found in North America, in Britain, and in many, many other parts of the world. So, you know, these are exciting times, I think, and I think that a lot more is about to come out. But if you want to read about Denisovans, it's something that I've been writing extensively about in books since 2014. I was the first person to put in writing the idea that Denisovans could have been the giants of legend, and that was in the book Path of Souls, written by Gregory Little with contributions from myself. This was continued in the Cygnus Key, Denisovan Origins, and essentially that's it. So I want to thank you for your presence, and I'll say goodbye.